So speaking of hardware, though, you are known for your work on LiDAR, and yet Pronto is not going to be using LiDAR, and I'm wondering why. Is it because of, are you just staying away from it because of the Waymo Uber lawsuit, or is there some other reason why LiDAR is not in the picture with Pronto?
Yes, really good. So that's a great question, too. So I would say, so I don't have any restrictions on not doing LiDAR, but I do have a restriction personally of not doing things that I know aren't going to work. In the past, I understood, and I could see what we were doing, and basically back in 2009 or 10, you could see that the LiDARs didn't have the performance for what you needed because you couldn't see far enough to actually safely have the system react to the software, safely have the system see what's going on to have a correct reaction. It turns out that even with LiDAR, what's missing today is not seeing more accurately or seeing further. What's missing is understanding what is happening to those vehicles around you and being able to predict what the motion is so that you can react accordingly and be safe. And not just predict what their motion is going to be, but what they think you're going to be doing. And so we mainly focus on that because that's the building block that is unlocking the future. Now, I'll say I was a huge proponent of LiDAR, and
it was the sauce, right?
Well, that was not my quote, but I definitely believed that was actually the unlocking factor. A wiser person than me, and I'll eat some humble pie here, said that LiDAR is a crutch.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about that.
Yep.
So you would agree with Elon Musk, he said, and he's been ridiculed for that a bit.
He's right.
For calling LiDAR a crutch, and that's what you believe as well.
I believe that as well. And I don't believe that because I can't do it, because I'm happy to do that. It's just not where I think the actual value is coming from. And you could look at that, right? So if you were to analyze all the disengages that people have done and try to break it down, what's the actual real reason behind that? Is the real reason because the brakes weren't redundant or the steering wasn't redundant? Nope. In fact, that's 0.0% of all disengages are because there was no fail operational system. All of them are software failure, and they're mainly a software failure, on mature companies at trying to understand what the vehicle is going to be doing, or the pedestrians around you, and you having a misunderstanding or miscommunication with them. And so that's where the value is going to be. Now, we could have this conversation in a couple of years and be like, that wasn't the problem. The problem is this other new thing that we don't know about. But like all scientific process, you make a hypothesis, you test it, and you're wrong, and then you move on. Before Galileo, we used to think that the Earth was the center, and the sun went around us, and then he realized it was opposite. That was a major discovery back then, and they were like, oh, we're going to, this whole Inquisition and all kinds of things I can relate to a little bit about that. And so, I would say, going forward, I'm all about finding where the problem is and solving that. And right now, the problem is not better lasers. The problem is prediction.
It's interesting because you talk about the willingness to discard things that don't work, and yet you really did work on a single premise for a decade or so. And I'm wondering if, this is going to sound crazy, but was the lawsuit and everything that happened sort of a blessing? Did it cause you to rethink things, or were you already starting to rethink that maybe this level 4 first approach isn't the way to go?
Yeah, so I would think that it's hard. Once you're in the middle of something and you're dedicated fully to it, it's very difficult to get perspective and see you think you're there, but actually you're missing this other path that's going to block you completely. So I definitely would say that taking a step back and taking some time to reflect on my life and things I could do better and where
you started a church?
Yeah, well, that's not when the church was started, but that's that was while I was at Google in 2015. But to think about really what is the actual problem and be able to start from a clean slate is very difficult to do at a company, specifically when you're dealing with the day-to-day about this team and that team don't get along and all kinds of other problems. At that point, it's very difficult to really set the strategy of what you need to do. You just focus on executing along that path. So we'll know if it was a blessing in disguise or not. But I think I'm pretty hopeful about the future, and I'm optimistic about what we're doing.
So while you have now pursuing Pronto, there's dozens of companies that are still pursuing this level 4, and I'm just wondering, in your view now, and I wonder how they would respond to this, but they're not on stage, so we can't ask them. But do you no longer believe that level 4 is achievable safely in the short term?
Well, so what I would say is I encourage people to have different approaches because that could totally be wrong. And so it's great that other people have different points of views. And what I would say is like the true metric for when AVs actually get to be deployed is safety, right? So safety is the only metric that determines when an AV will come out, not whether they use LiDAR or not, or car maker or software vendor. And so I don't personally think that straight to level 4 is going to be something that is doable, because you'll need to have a very long time before you actually solve the problems. And by providing technology that evolves and gets better over time, you'll be able to like chip away at all the problems. People use an example of, if you're going to the moon, building a ladder doesn't really help you. Well, the thing is that we're not going to the moon. We're just trying to drive to the corner store and back. And so we shouldn't be building, that's an analogy that while you should be building the right technology with the right strategy, it's not necessarily that you can't make an evolutionary step to get there. And I think that the evolutionary step will uncover a lot of lessons learned that will make it safer and better.
So what should we do to appease our AI overlords prior to the singularity apocalypse?
It's a phenomenal question. Well, you can sign up for a Udacity course and learn how to do that. I'm sure there's other classes that you can do as well. No, I mean, ultimately, I think it's a funny question, but progress is inevitable, and you want to make sure that you help create the progress and understand where that's going, as opposed to deny it or try to cage it up, or say that it's more dangerous than nuclear weapons, and just be fearful. Basically, AI has a huge opportunity to connect us in a way that you couldn't before. And we can build that in a fearful way, or in a way that has bias, or we can build that in a way that's going to be helpful for us. So don't be scared is the 3-letter answer or 3-word answer.